Konnichiwa. My name is Arnar Árnason. I'm an anthropologist in the Department of Anthropology at the University of Aberdeen in Scotland. And I would like to speak to you today about a network or a centre for research in death studies that exists here at Aberdeen. I'm going to speak to you about the centre and the work that we do here. The centre is led by myself and my colleague Vikki Entwistle and brings together people from the university, also from outside of the university, within the UK, but also internationally, for collaboration and networking for people who are interested in the study of death. Before I tell you anything more about the centre, it might be helpful if I tell you a little bit about the projects that we have so far carried out, are carrying out, and hope to carry out. The centre, as such, has its origin in a project we carried out between 2021 and 2023, which was called Care in Funerals. The key idea behind the project was to ask if we can think of funerals as a form of care, in the same way as in the UK, for example, we have systems of healthcare and systems of social care. Funerals are, of course, diverse. They have many different purposes, many different functions, and they carry a variety of different meanings to people. The project was carried out during the COVID-19 pandemic and the restrictions that that placed on people in terms of their movement and gatherings. And so the idea of the project was that the pandemic and the restrictions imposed might be revealing of what really matters to people about funerals. That the decisions and the choices that people had to make under the COVID restrictions, for example, about who would be invited to a funeral, who would be excluded, activities that might take place, rituals that had to be disrupted, that the choices that people had to make would reveal something about what really matters to them when it comes to funerals. In the course of the project, we carried out interviews with people who had been bereaved during the pandemic, with celebrants, both religious and then from a variety of different religious traditions, but also non-religious celebrants and funeral directors. Some of the people we interviewed fell into all three of these different categories. And what the interviews revealed were some of the heartbreaking choices that people had to make and the distress it caused them when, for example, they could only invite 10 people to a funeral. They could not commemorate the person that they had lost in the way that they would have wanted to and felt that that person deserved. The kind of activities that were prohibited during this time, the ways in which rituals were disrupted, the ways in which people could not attend to and care for their loved ones as they were dying, or immediately after they died. But the interviews also revealed many of the creative ways in which people responded to those restrictions, the ways they found to make the funerals meaningful to themselves and, as they hoped, to the loved ones who had died, in spite of the restrictions. While the active phase of the project has finished, we are currently writing papers based on the material that we have gathered. 2 papers are already published. and you can find details of them in the link here below. But we have also constructed what we call ethics casebook. The link to that casebook is also here below. It is open and free to use for all. The casebook brings together in 12 stories some of the key ethical questions, ethical dilemmas that people faced and that surfaced through our research. The casebook then tells the stories of these cases and offers at least 2 commentaries on each that seek to place them in commentaries that seek to place these cases in their social, cultural, and religious context, and offer reflections on the ethical problems the stories tell of and how people might respond to them. Each case is then also accompanied by a number of questions that are suggestions for how people might approach these cases. The ethics casebook is, as I said before, open and free to use to all. And the idea is, and the hope is, that people might find the cases there useful to think about the ethical questions that they might face around funerals and care for the dead more generally, either in their private lives or in their professional lives. The second project that I would like to tell you about is called Grave Goods. That is being carried out by Dr. Jenny Riley. Jenny was a research fellow on the Care in Funerals project, and she is now a Levium-funded research fellow carrying out a project that, to some extent, is inspired by the Care in Funerals project, but is Jenny's project. One of the insights that we gathered from the Care in Funerals project was how common it seems to be for people in the UK at the moment to place a variety of objects in the graves of their loved ones, within the coffins as they are buried, and so on. Grave goods is, of course, a classic archaeological topic, and a lot of archaeological work and interpretations of past societies have been based on what archaeologists have unearthed through the examination of objects left in people's graves. There is also existing research in anthropology, for example, on the activities and the objects that people place on and around graves. But there is little on the actual objects themselves that people currently seek to place in graves, on contemporary grave goods, in other words. Examining and seeking an understanding of what these objects are and what motivates people in placing them in graves is, on the one hand, of course, important to understand death more generally, people's ideas around death, the dead, and what happens after death. But it's also possibly an opportunity to reflect on some of the archaeological ideas that have been built through the study of grave goods from past societies. The project is carried out largely through an extensive survey seeking to document the prevalence of grave goods in contemporary UK, and then on interviews with numerous people who have placed goods in the graves of their loved ones, who work in the area, and so on. This project is currently ongoing, and papers from this project will be appearing in the next year or so. The third project I would like to tell you about, a project that we are still developing, is called Respecting the Dead, or an alternative title, Living Well with the Dead. The idea behind the project is to recognize the presence of the dead in everyday life, but also the various different ways in which, and the very different contexts in which we might encounter the dead, and indeed what these encounters mean and what they possibly do. Behind this is a recognition that contemporary societies are characterized by diverse communities, and that in diverse communities, the dead often have very different places in people's life. Indeed, what in one particular context in a particular community might be thought of as the dead might have a very different status in another community. With diverse communities come diverse rituals and ideas about death, indeed about the dead and what happens at and after death. The idea here is that in order to live well together, we have to come to a better understanding of how we live well together, not just with the living, but also with the dead. In looking to the different contexts in which we encounter the dead, and what these encounters may mean, and what they may do to different people in different communities. We are, for example, thinking about cases where law and public health and what these demand come into tensions with notions of respect for the dead, and indeed by implication the living, and diverse ideas and practices around death and the dead. Some of that was revealed to us during the pandemic, when regulation put in place for the sake of public health, very understandably, had very different impacts on different people from different cultural and religious communities. I am then going to move on and tell you a little bit more about the Death Studies Network, or Centre, here at the University of Aberdeen. The Centre is essentially a network of people in Aberdeen, at the University of Aberdeen, and beyond. It brings together practitioners within the area, people who work in, broadly speaking, the death industries, healthcare, and so on, and then academics. While the centre is based in Aberdeen, it is international and has members from across the world, and it is open to all. And the key purpose of this presentation is really to invite and encourage anybody who is interested in the study of death to think about joining the network that the Centre at Aberdeen is hoping to be. What we do is we seek to bring people together, people with an interest in the study of death, do that to some extent for its own sake, for the interest that such bringing together can be, but also to offer avenues for people to establish networks for collaboration which can of course take a number of different forms. Collaboration that can be about research and grant applications. We run, for example, what we call a journal club, where somebody associated with the center will possibly tell us a little bit about an article they have either been writing or have read, and lead a discussion and reflection on the particular issues and topics and questions that particular article might raise. The journal club happens on a monthly basis. While it is based in Aberdeen, and those of us who here will gather in person in Aberdeen, it is hybrid, so attendance can be through Teams, for example, and participation is open to all. We also have a mailing list where we disseminate information about our activity and other activity that we are aware of that is of relevance and interest to people interested in the study of death. Everybody is absolutely welcome to join both the journal club and indeed the network at the center. We are very much looking to engage with people widely, internationally, across the world, and so would encourage you, if you are interested, to get in contact with us. And the best way to do so is simply to email me, and my address is there at the bottom of this slide. Thank you all very much. Best wishes from Aberdeen.